From MTN News, this is Montana This Morning.
Good Tuesday morning. It's 5:30. Welcome to Montana This Morning. I'm Victoria Hill. Happy to see you starting your day with us.
And I'm Ed McIntosh as we're off and going on a warm day. Temperatures are going to be on their way up today, and we're talking about the first day of fall.
Yes, we are, and it doesn't sound like you're talking about the first day of fall.
It really doesn't. Yeah, a calm wind at 52 degrees at the Billings Airport right now. Yesterday we were 9 degrees above the seasonal average at 79 degrees, and this morning we're starting off with 38 in Butte and Bozeman for a couple of the cooler readings, but all the way to a mild 56 in Cody, 52 up in Williston, North Dakota, 42 in Jordan. Miles City said 48 a couple of seconds ago. Sheridan updated to 44 and 42 in Livingston. So for southern Montana and northern Wyoming, well, most of the readings are in the 40s and 50s to get started, which is fairly mild for this time of the year. We'll be looking at those afternoon highs moving above seasonal averages by, in the Billings area, a good 15 degrees above where we would typically be. But we will pick up a little bit of smoke today, and there are some changes ahead. Start getting into that fall roller coaster as far as weather goes. We'll show you what that's all about coming up in a few minutes.
So, technically fall does start later this morning, but
that's right.
The weather says it's just a little delayed. It's coming a little late, right? Delayed flight.
Yes, it's coming in. The baggage was left somewhere else, so
that's
it's
what happened.
Coming in.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you for that, Ed. I will get on to the news.
Okay, thanks.
We begin in the courtroom this morning where a Billings mother is charged with the death of her 5-year-old son after authorities say she caused a crash while under the influence that also left her 7-year-old daughter seriously injured. 30-year-old Kaylia Mullendor is charged with vehicular homicide under the influence, negligent vehicular assault, 4 counts of felony criminal endangerment, and driving with a suspended or revoked license. Court documents state last November, Mullendor's vehicle was rear-ended, and after a car was hit, she sped off and crashed head-on into another vehicle near 32nd and Gable. 3 children were in the car at the time. Only one was in a car seat, and her 5-year-old son died just days after the crash. Her daughter spent 2 months in the hospital and has undergone numerous procedures since. Mullendor faces up to 30 years in prison. The former school bus driver accused of driving 28 kids to Binsdale Middle School while high on drugs last week is facing 20 years in prison. On Monday, 46-year-old Keith Jones pleaded not guilty to 2 counts of criminal endangerment and 1 count of driving under the influence. Police arrested Jones last Thursday after students on the bus told teachers his driving was out of control and he was slumping over the steering wheel. Officials say when Jones was arrested, he admitted he was carrying around a vial of urine to pass a drug test later that day. In national news, Senate Republicans are gearing up to try and confirm President Trump's nominee to the Supreme Court by the end of this year. The president is expected to announce his choice to replace Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg at the end of the week. CBS's Laura Podesta brings us more on the nomination fight.
The nation is preparing to say its final goodbyes to Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Wednesday and Thursday, her body will lie in repose outside the Supreme Court. On Friday, she'll become the first woman to lie in state at the U.S. Capitol.
I, Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Meanwhile, the political battle rages on over the vacancy left behind.
So as our nation mourns the loss of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I will soon announce a nominee for the United States Supreme Court.
President Trump is expected to nominate a woman on Friday or Saturday. Ginsburg was the court's leading liberal, but the nominee is expected to be a staunch conservative who could reshape the court if approved.
I'm proud to serve alongside the most pro-life president in American history, and I know that same standard will be met with his nominee to fill this vacancy on the Supreme Court.
Senate Republicans are preparing to move quickly to confirm the nominee.
The Senate has more than sufficient time to process a nomination.
But Democrats say it's hypocritical.
Leader McConnell put the Senate on pause for over 4 months while COVID-19 devastated our country. But now he will move earth and heaven and ignore all principle and consistency to install a new Supreme Court justice.
Ginsburg will be buried in Arlington National Cemetery next to her husband, Martin, who was laid to rest there in 2010. Laura Podesta, CBS News, Washington.
One of the frontrunners, Judge Amy Coney Barrett, was at the White House yesterday. Barrett is a mother of 7 who has won over religious conservatives for being against abortion. Montana's Republican Senator Steve Daines says the Senate will exercise its right to confirm or reject President Trump's Supreme Court nominee this year. Back in 2016, Daines told MTN he wouldn't support a vote for a president's nominee in an election year, no matter which party had control. 4 years ago, the Republican-controlled Senate refused to hold a hearing for then-President Obama's nominee, Merrick Garland, after the passing of Justice Antonin Scalia. Now, Senator Daines says the Senate should vote quickly on President Trump's nominee, citing his concern over potential Biden-nominated justice.
What's at stake today is our Montana way of life, and there is a very clear choice. President Trump will select a well-qualified nominee who will protect our Montana way of life, someone who will defend the Second Amendment, who will support forest management projects and the Keystone Pipeline.
Democrat Senator Jon Tester has said the nomination should wait until voters choose the next president. He said that's the principle that Republicans invoked 4 years ago and wants them to do the same thing this year. Meanwhile, 2 bills supported by Senator Tester addressing the widespread problem of missing and murdered Indigenous women across Montana and the United States are now just a signature away by the president from becoming law. Yesterday, the U.S. House passed Savannah's Act and the Not Invisible Act. Savannah's Act was named for a Native American woman who was murdered in Fargo, North Dakota. It ensures tribal governments are given the resources they need to better respond to cases in the future. The Not Invisible Act establishes an advisory committee on violent crime made up of law enforcement, tribal leaders, and survivors. That committee will report directly to the Justice Department. Also making headlines this morning, the United Nations will host its first virtual General Assembly debate. Typically, world leaders gather in New York City every year to speak. Today's pre-recorded addresses will feature leaders of countries that have been making international headlines amid the pandemic. President Trump says his speech will include a message for China on its role in the coronavirus. Leaders from China, Brazil, and Russia will also speak. Russia has recently been scrutinized for developing a vaccine too quickly. The Justice Department is now designating New York City, Seattle, and Portland as anarchist jurisdictions, saying they don't do enough to stop violent protests and riots. The White House says the cities could face the loss of some federal funding. All 3 have Democrat mayors and are in states with Democrat governors. In a joint statement, the mayors accused President Trump's administration of playing cheap political games. Tropical storm Beta has made landfall in Texas. The National Hurricane Center says it landed with sustained winds of 45 miles per hour late last night. The main threat is storm surge and heavy rainfall. This is video from Houston showing a man in waist-high floodwaters. The storm is expected to dump another foot of rain today as it continues to move along the coast in Texas and Louisiana. The wildfires in California have now burned enough land to cover the entire state of Connecticut. More than 5,600 square miles are now scorched. Dozens of fires are still burning across the state. 5 of them are some of the largest in California's history. One of them is still threatening homes near Los Angeles. Around 23,000 people are under evacuation orders right now across the state. Meanwhile, coronavirus cases are back on the rise in many states in the U.S. And as CNN's John Lawrence reports, those numbers are likely to keep rising.
President Trump says he is pleased with how his administration is handling the coronavirus.
On the job itself, we take an A+. We're rounding the corner on the pandemic, and we've done a phenomenal job, not just a good job, a phenomenal job.
Some of his top advisors say the country has the upper hand on COVID-19.
We've regained control of the virus, both the cases and the fatalities.
Medical experts have repeatedly disagreed with such assessments.
We've had mixed messaging on everything from masks to whether certain drugs or treatments work, to whether we should be social distancing or whether lockdowns are needed. And I think this is yet another nail in the coffin of our disastrous response.
According to Johns Hopkins University, more than 24 states are seeing a rise in week-to-week new cases. and the death toll keeps climbing.
Sometimes as the perception, it was this bad virus, we did all we could, and this was inevitable. It's obviously not the case. I mean, you just need to look around the world.
The United States accounts for 4% of the world's population, but has about 21% of all coronavirus fatalities.
This is a time not to look backwards, but to look ahead and say, what can we do as a nation to come together so that we're not talking about 300,000 deaths and 400,000 deaths.
I'm John Lawrence reporting.
The head of the CDC says a vaccine probably won't be available to much of the public until the middle of 2021. In education news, Billings Public School officials and local health leaders are trying to keep students in the classroom amid a rise in COVID cases across Yellowstone County. Right now, the county averages 31 cases per 100,000 people weekly. That's a rise of 13 people since the numbers were calculated just last week. The positivity rate for children under 19 jumped 9% over that same time frame. If those numbers go much higher, health officials may recommend the district cancel in-person classes. To help prevent closures, some school staff will begin training tomorrow to more quickly identify students who should be quarantined.